Welcome to the inaugural episode of Best Practice. I'm your host, Chris Lunt, and the raison d'etre of this video series is to promote the use of technology in assessment. I'll be talking to guests about how technology has been integral to their intervention strategies, or how it has encouraged best practice in higher education. In this very first episode, my guest, Dr. Tina Lindquist, will be talking about the research that she undertook on answer-changing behaviour. So let's see what we learned. So you are Dr. Tina Lindquist, Director of Instruction Design at the College of Osteopathic Medicine at Touro University in Nevada. We met at a conference a couple of months ago, and you told me a story about a project that I absolutely had to share. So why don't you talk us through the research, how it came about, its purpose, methodology, results, and can't wait to hear it.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for inviting me to do this video. So my research is a lump sum of research. We've been looking at how students answer questions based on timing data. So how long do they look at a question for the first time they're seeing a question? How long do they spend in total? So how many times do they come back and revisit the question? And then we can also look at how many times they change their answer. If they change their answer, what are they doing in there? And this research came about because I was a learning specialist at Touro University, and students would come in after taking an exam and they'd be like, oh my God, I knew the answers, but I couldn't get to the answers, and I didn't know I couldn't think of it, but if you ask me the question now, I know the answer.
Yeah.
So this kind of came about because you ask the question, well, why do students get questions wrong when they've studied this material? And what it came down to for me was looking at how long they're spending on the questions. Are they under a time pressure, a time stress for those questions? And maybe that is causing some cognitive overload for the students, where they're unable to generate the correct answer that they've studied and learned and all of that kind of stuff. So that's where this research kind of came from. When you look at the literature out there on answer changing behavior, the literature is a little bit old, and they've been looking at answer changing on Scantron sheets. Yeah. So fill in the bubble, and then if you make an erasure, then I can look at your Scantron and I can see that there's an erasure. But now we have computer-based testing. Okay. So with the computer-based testing, we've got a whole lot of data that gets collected in the background. So I could take all of the data that the students generated during an exam without even bothering them to know that data were being collected. So
I guess if students know that they're sort of under the spotlight, that might in a sense have its own impact on how they would behave.
Right. Yeah. So that was an integral part of the way that we collected the data, was not really putting them under a stress, because they're already under enough stress taking exams in medical school. But collecting that data in the background through the computer-based testing platform, we're able to look at that timing data without them thinking about, oh, they're going to be looking at this first time I looked at this question and I spent 2 minutes on it, and now I don't want to go back to it because I spent 2 minutes on it, without getting into their head too much, basically. Yeah. But also collecting real-time testing data is important, because if I'm able to analyze what a student is actually doing when they're testing, when they don't think I'm looking at what they're doing, then when we come back to it and go through that data with the student, it feels more authentic, it's more real for the student.
So you were able to collect all of the answer changing behavior on the students through your systems. How did you play that back to the students?
So we do a couple of different things when we're looking at the data. We can use it in a one-on-one situation where I can download the data from the computer-based testing platform, and then we can analyze the data. We basically just built several Excel macros to get the information that we're looking for out of the snapshot data from the computer-based testing platform, and then kind of bring it to the student and show them, okay, on average, you're spending this amount of time on questions. The first time you look at a question, you return to it this many times, and these are the questions you changed your answers on. And for 5 of those questions, it was beneficial for you to change the answers, and on 3, it wasn't beneficial. So then we can start to develop a test-taking strategy for that student, rather than giving just general blanket test-taking strategies like, oh, never change your answers, or always change your answers, or, you know, change your answers if blah, blah, blah. We're able to look at how does that strategy work for that student.
So does that mean that based upon the data you were able to collect, you could say to students on an individual basis what sort of, you could help work with them to understand what strategy works best for them?
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
And that was a big part of the impetus of looking at the snapshot data and trying to figure out how we could use it to help the students, and make that personalized testing strategy.
And so how did the students react to the feedback?
At first, they were a little bit skeptical. They were like, you're going to mess with my testing strategy? I don't really want to do that. I mean, they're in medical school now, so they've been taking tests for, you know, a huge part of their lives. So they at first didn't want to know. It was almost like, you know, what you don't know won't hurt you.
Yeah.
But then I started dangling the, like, no, we can see if answer changing is good for you. And they were like, wow, I do think I change a lot of answers. And that was really an interesting point, because they don't change many answers. Or if they're changing answers, they're changing them up here before they even put it into the computer.
Right. So they kind of question themselves before they've made the actual action in the system. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So once you get one student in to do this, and then that student tells a bunch of other students, then you just are doing this all the time. And they really do like it, because they like to be able to see, I've had some students come back several times, and they're like, okay, well, this time I tried doing this and I want to see how that works. So they're almost becoming little scientists with their own testing data.
It's incredible. And so, having gone through this process now, how long did you do this analysis for, and before you started to make the implementation, before you started to implement a strategy for change?
So we have been doing the single case test analysis for, I believe, about 4 years now. And all through that time, I was working on my dissertation while I was working on my doctoral courses and developing my dissertation. So that's why we haven't had any publications yet, because I'm kind of saving it all for the dissertation publication.
Yeah.
But we've been doing this for 4 years, and the interesting thing is that, you know, even though the students, we've had some students move through medical school and have this kind of change, in the larger scheme of things, this hasn't really affected the students too much. It's just given them more information about what they're doing. And more often than not, it's reinforcing the things that they're doing that are really good for them, rather than creating a whole lot of stress around changing strategies.
Sure. Yeah, so just doing more of what they do well, just encouraging more of those good habits.
Yeah, exactly.
And has, after all of the work that's gone into this, has it spread out? Have the other faculties taken an interest, or the programs sort of said, oh, that's interesting, can we get involved? Or is that the sort of next step?
That's part of the next steps, is really kind of bringing it out to the faculty as a whole and showing them what we can do. We wanted to really make sure that we were doing it and doing it well before we introduced it to a wider range of faculty. And then also, the College of Medicine is the only school here at Toro that has been using the computer-based testing platform that we've developed the macros for. So we can download the snapshot data from this program and figure it out.
Yeah.
But we don't have the ability to do it for any other program.
Understood. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, amazing story. So essentially, a heck of a lot of data has gone into, a heck of a lot of research has gone into producing that data. Come up with some, I don't know if would you call it an intervention strategy, or it sounds like it's more of a helping hand to just encourage more best practice.
Yeah. I think that's, you know, when you look at students at this level, at the medical school level, you don't want to mess with them too much. They've got really good strategies. So too much intervention, especially, you know, as they move through these first 2 years towards their first level boards, that's a huge stressor that they have. So they need to know that what they're doing is a really good practice.
Yeah.
So this just adds to, okay, you need to do maybe a little bit more of this, maybe spend a little bit more time on these kind of questions, but really you're doing the right thing, so that they don't start overthinking their board questions, because, you know, then they're in there for 8 hours taking the board exams and they're like, oh my God, what did Tina say about that?
So it helps with the confidence. It's all good.
Yeah.
So what's next? If people want to learn more about this, have you got anything on the horizon? Are you planning to share this more widely?
So 2 things that I'm working on right now. I'm reanalyzing the data for my dissertation so that I can get it published. So that's kind of on the horizon, but I'm also waiting for a notification from AERA, which is the American Educational Research Association. I'm hoping that I'll get to present this at their conference in April in San Francisco. It's a really big conference, a great conference, and, you know, anybody in the educational world should come to see it.
Fantastic. Well, Dr. Tina Lindquist, thank you so much for your time and sharing the story, the research, the methodology behind it. I wish you the very best of luck with the dissertation, and who knows, maybe some people watching this will get to see you at the AERA providing a presentation on your findings. So we look forward to it.
Great. Thank you so much for introducing me to this.
Thanks very much. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to share any of your own stories, please do get in touch. Until then, that was Best Practice. I'll see you next time on The Next Practice.